All right, YouTube, if you look at Congress and the president right now, they're continuing to do their strange little dance around this debt ceiling and government shutdown issue. If you've been checking Twitter at all or the news at all, you'll see literally from 1 minute to the next, they'll say, oh, well, we're optimistic. It looks like an agreement's finally been reached. 10 minutes later, that same person will say, it's all falling apart. Things are terrible. It's not looking optimistic. If you had asked me a week ago, I would have told you that probably they'd hammer out a deal. It's looking less likely today than it has over the last couple of weeks, although it is still quite possible. The problem is this. The Republican Party, and it's both parties' fault. I always say this because it's always true. The Republican Party is catering to the goofiest of goofy right-wingers, mainly the Tea Party. And the Democratic Party is catering to the goofiest of goofy progressives. On one side, you've got the GOP sucking off on people like, I hate to say it, but Ted Cruz, obviously, but also people like Rand Paul, who, although I agree with him on certain issues, it's clear he's not actually a libertarian. He's just a neocon like the rest of them. If you look on the other side, you've got people like Pelosi. So the two parties, the chances of them reaching an agreement that both of them can swallow is next to nothing, because neither party at this juncture really wants to give an inch. They both want to claim victory. The Republicans can't back down because they've already started this with the Obamacare issue. They were hoping the Democrats would have blinked by now. They're not going to back down because it would be a huge defeat for them. The Democrats aren't going to back down because it would be seen as a huge defeat for them too, because they would be giving credence to the demands of the Tea Party. So you've got these, again, I've said it, the two-party system we've got doesn't really work anymore. It used to work marginally better than it does now, but it doesn't work at all anymore because you've got these fringe groups on both sides controlling the parties, or controlling enough votes within the party so that it's impossible for that party to override the other when bad ideas are being put forth. It's become almost impossible. And it doesn't help that Obama has been unwilling to compromise too. And I hear people saying, oh, well, it's all the Democrats' fault, or oh, it's all the GOP's fault. No, it's both of their faults. Nobody's really negotiating. They're putting forward the same bills in slightly different form over and over again and hoping the other side won't notice. Both sides have been doing this. And they're watering down their expectations very slightly, but that's not going to get you to that middle road where you need to be, because to the Democrats, the only thing that will get passed is a debt ceiling increase, no changes to spending, or even one proposal was increased spending. Nothing about Obamacare, nothing about any of that. To the GOP, it's our way or the highway. You're going to include Congress and their staff have to go on Obamacare and decrease spending. And they're not willing to give an inch. So it doesn't look good for the economy right now, because what happens if a default hits? It could be that nothing happens and that the government simply can't spend as much money as it has been. More programs go into shutdown, or it stays about the same. It would affect the poor disproportionate to the rest of the population, which is regrettable. Or it could be that, the currency hyperinflates, or we go into depression mode, or we lose yet more credit ratings, or, everyone starts switching off the dollar for the international currency or something. You don't have a clue what's going to happen. It's really untested waters. Yes, defaults have happened before. Usually they're disastrous. That's the problem. Right now you see the GOP and the Democratic Party are playing a game of chicken. Only these trains that are driving towards one another at top speed, they don't have any brakes, and they can't leave the track. Oh no, what's going to happen? Sit back and laugh if we default and the economy starts falling apart. These people don't care. They'll continue to get their pensions, because those are essential funds. They can't be cut. They'll keep getting their pensions. They'll keep being rich. They don't care. If the country falls apart too badly, they can get on a plane and go somewhere else. You don't have that privilege, most likely. People should be prepared for the possibility that shit's about to hit the fan. If you've got a little bit of food stocked up, that's probably a good thing. If you've got some sort of weapon in case marauding gangs of bandits that are starving come to your door trying to loot your home, that's probably a good thing too. Be prepared. That's far from certain that anything like that will happen, because again, the negotiations could go fine. And later today or tomorrow in the morning or evening, you could see some sort of deal hammered out. It'll probably be a shitty deal. It'll probably include a bunch of material nobody really wants or needs, but it'll be a debt ceiling increase. It'll be a continued budget, some sort of deal. The problem is this. The GOP fans, all the roughly third of the population that's hardcore right and doesn't care what you tell them, they're going to have their Bible in hand at all times, will blame Obama and the Senate up and down and say the Republicans have done nothing wrong. And the roughly one-third of the population that's hard blue will swear up and down it's all the Tea Party's fault and it's all the GOP's fault and Obama is a blameless angel and the Senate's just doing its job. These people need to mature, wake up and smell reality and realize there are things beyond this goofy two-party system that if you had any ability to see what was going on at all and you had a clear head, you would understand was currently not working properly. The function of a two-party system, presumably, is to prevent one party or the other from abusing the population. But if the population is being abused anyway, what good has it served? When the Constitution is largely, let's face it, being ignored right now, when the economy is on the precipice, as it is, when the recovery that we're supposedly in is tenuous at best and not really much of a recovery at all, unemployment is still high, there are still a lot of people on assistance who are underemployed, there are still a lot of small businesses that are being shut down, and this healthcare law, for better or for worse, doesn't seem to be actually working very well. If people are still suffering, regardless of this two-party system, it takes two to tango. You can't simply blame the people with R after their name or the people with D after their name and say, well, obviously they're at fault. My party would never hurt me. You're crazy. It's a form of madness to believe that either of these parties at this point in time, given all that they have done over the last roughly 20 years, that either party has your best interests at heart. And I'll keep saying it, these two parties really, let's face it, are not that different from one another. Other than a few wedge issues that they bring up during elections, they largely agree that we need to keep spending billions of dollars a year on the NSA spying on everybody, which the reports keep coming out, and it's worse and worse and worse. It's unconstitutional, clearly. It's a waste of money, clearly, but it's still getting funded, and both parties still support it largely, despite the fact that the average person in the population does not support it. We still continue to spend many, many hundreds of billions of dollars on a military that is inefficiently run. No disrespect to the military itself, but to the people who are funding the military, they keep using no-bid contracts, which means that we're paying out $100 for a hammer. They keep building up assets in other countries, in some cases where it's really not necessary to build them up, and they keep misusing the armed forces and sending people off to die in dangerous situations. They send them off for little or no reason, or for geopolitical reasons. They have nothing to do with national security. They simply have to do with, well, we want more money or we want to keep a hold of the money we've got. If the government is so concerned about national security, they ought to be tackling the real economic problems that we're facing, which is simply the government has become too burdensome and large to be funded properly. It's clear. No, I'm not saying that you should, we need to slash all these social programs because of these welfare leeches. No, we need to do across-the-board cuts of some measure to try to lower the amount that we're spending. It's common sense. We're spending more than we're making. Balance the budget. Clinton did it. Clinton balanced the budgets and did a fine job of doing it. We started running a surplus and things were fine. The average person under Clinton was not being trodden underfoot because the government was smaller. He had cut programs and invested in things that were working rather than investing in things that are dubious at best as to whether they serve any real purpose. The government has become bloated, and one of the problems is that all of these politicians are controlled by corporations and lobbies and bureaus and unions that just want more money for themselves. They don't represent the average American. They represent their own interest. So right now we're headed towards this cliff because the government is acting like a bunch of spoiled idiots. They're out of touch with what the average American wants. They have no clue what's going on. They're simply not willing to reform the system. I think that the biggest hypocrisy, though, and I will blame this largely on the Democrats, although I'm sure there were Republicans that crossed over on this, so woe unto them when elections come, hopefully, saying that, they're not going to allow this exemption to go away that keeps Congress and their staff from going into the Obamacare exchanges. I think that's relatively reasonable. You can talk about the other stuff, delaying these mandates or whatever, or holding off on the entire program altogether. That alone seemed pretty reasonable. What's unreasonable, though, is that they're sitting up there right now drunk and not negotiating properly. That's what's unreasonable. It's no fault of the American people because they've lost control of the politicians, which they're not supposed to rule the population. They're supposed to represent the population. They're supposed to represent the interests of the population, whose interests are being served by Congress ignoring other issues and spending weeks and weeks debating this proposed debt ceiling increase to keep the economy functioning. Nobody's being helped by it. It's ridiculous. They're acting like a bunch of 3-year-olds. The average high school debate team could more easily come to a logical and reasonable conclusion, a sane conclusion that would maximize benefit for the population than the Congress and the president can. That's sad. And yet people persist in this delusion that the two-party system has worked. It's delusional. But there should be a party that's simply called the Common Sense Party, the We Won't Screw You Party, the, we're not going to waste time arguing about issues that could be solved already party. That's what we really need in this country. A little bit of responsibility and a little bit of common sense goes a hell of a long way. It's something that both parties, because they've been taken over by fringe elements, don't seem to understand. That includes the Republicans, that includes the Democrats, that includes the bottom line of both parties, which is essentially the Tea Party and the progressives. That includes them all. It includes Bush, it includes Obama, it includes all of these people. They don't have a clue what's going on. Most of these people are simply a bunch of rich lawyers and career politicians. They've never had to suffer through being unemployed or being on welfare. They've never seen, what it's like to be poor. And these are the people you vote for. That's the problem.